Hi, I'm Dean Arnett. When I'm talking about TV studios, the two questions I get asked the most are, which is best, a real studio or a virtual studio? And the second question is, that studio of yours, is that real or is it virtual? Well, if it was real, would I be able to do this? Or would I be able to do this? Or would I be able to do this? No. But then, if it was virtual, would I be able to do this? No, I wouldn't. The answer is, it's both. It's actually two studios that look the same. One is real and one is virtual. Which is best? Well, let me talk you through first of all the story of how I got to this situation, and then we'll talk through the pros and cons of both. Before we go any further, don't forget to click on that subscribe button and look for me on social media. I'm on most of the main platforms under my name, Dean Arnett. Okay, let's get back on. I've been delivering broadcast media skills training courses now for over 15 years to clients all around the world, and mainly face-to-face. I used to also pre-record my courses so people could access them at their leisure online. And I built a green screen studio to do that, but the results were never entirely satisfying, and so I never pretended it was anything other than a stylized green screen. When COVID happened, of course, like everyone, I had to rethink how I did my job. So I realized I'd have to deliver my training online. And I didn't want the hassle of having a complicated green screen, just adding another element of something to go wrong in an already reasonably stressful process, i.e. a live environment when you're delivering live streaming, and you have to have your cameras just right, your lighting just right, and your sound just right. I wanted everything to be near broadcast quality standard, and green screens can often let that down. So I decided to use a real set, and what better set for someone delivering broadcast training skills than a working edit suite, which is what this is. This is my working edit suite. But of course, anyone who's been to an edit suite knows that edit suites are usually dark and gloomy places. Don't believe me? I'll prove it. That's what my edit suite looks like normally when I'm working. It doesn't look very interesting. It looks dark and gloomy on camera. So I've had to add lots of lights to that set to make it more interesting. And that's what's involved in building a small studio. So let me take you through what I've had to do here to make it a more interesting and usable, and crucially, a phrase that I like to use with it has flick switch ease of use. In other words, every time I want to use this studio, I don't have to go around and put all the lights up and set all the cameras and set all the sound. I just have to flick a switch and everything comes on. So flick of switch ease of use is crucial. So let me show you around and show you what I've done in here. The key thing about a studio is everything needs to be controllable, especially the sound, especially the light. And logistically, you don't want anything spontaneous and unexpected happening in the back of shot. So you don't want random people or pets walking through the back of shot. So choosing the right location for that, first of all, is important. You don't want natural light, or certainly not too much natural light in shot, because as the sun comes in and goes out, or if you're filming during the day and long into the evening, that's going to affect the lighting of your set. So let's have a look at what's needed to create a set like this. Well, I mean, it breaks down to the set itself, of course, cameras, sound, and lights. Let's start with sound. Now, a lot of people choose to go down the route of podcast microphones like this. These are great, they give you great quality sound, but the problem is, in order to get that good quality sound, you need to get them quite close to the source of the sound, which of course is your microphone. So they can often obscure the face, or at the very least be a bit of a distraction in shot. So I choose to go down the classical conventional broadcast route, which is a lapel mic like this. Lapel mics are small, they're omnidirectional, they pick up sound from all directions, but crucially they're close to the source of the sound, so they give you good quality sound. I then mix that sound with any source sound, i.e. videos or anything like that, with this here, which is a sound mixer. I'm actually only using 2 channels on this sound mixer, but it also means that I'm able to create what we call in broadcast a clean feed, or in America they call it a mix minus. So I can monitor sound without getting howl round or reverberation back down my live feed. What about lights? Well, I use 2 lights, oh well, 3 lights altogether. 2 lights at the front, one as my key light, which is up there, and one as my fill light up there. I then have a backlight to create this shimmer around the top of my head and on my shoulders, and you can see, where is it? That's that light back up there, back up in the top of the studio. These front lights, my key and my fill, are panel lights, and they work quite well. The light at the backlight, I need it to be more controllable. I don't want it going all over the place because then it'll ruin the ambient lighting of the set. So that's a tungsten focused tungsten light, spotlight. Those spotlights are much more easily controlled. Now, as you saw when I did the transition between the set lights and no set lights make a big difference and are really, really important. But in a way, they're the most difficult lights to set up because you want small lights. You could buy these kind of just ordinary, everyday decorative lights from Amazon, but the problem is, not being professional lights, it's difficult to control the light level that's coming out of them. Sometimes they can be too bright, sometimes they're not bright enough. So it takes a lot of experimentation. To begin with, I tried LED rope lights, but they didn't really work. They just gave little sparkles in the shop. So what I've tried this time, and what I've settled on, is hidden lights behind the props and behind the monitors. So what these are doing is they're lighting the background. So all the detail in the shot is in front of the light. So what I'm doing is I'm not actually lighting the set, I'm lighting the background behind the set. And I've done that with these hidden lights behind the props. Here's an old projector. I bought some cheap LED lights and various fancy lights off Amazon. And the rest I've done with cheap, these are actually bathroom lights that I got on Amazon, and then I treated them with blue film. Now, I've got 4 cameras in this studio, or at least I used to have 4 cameras. I've got my close-up camera here, that's camera 1. Over here, I've got camera 2, which gives me this big wide shot view of the studio. And if you look just up here above my head, this is an arm and a clamp that I've built into the desk itself. And here the third camera sits and looks down at the desk. And I can use this camera to show close-ups of buttons on equipment if I'm demonstrating how to use a piece of equipment, or close-ups on the keyboard if I'm demonstrating a piece of software. I can show keyboard shortcuts. Now you can see that there's no camera there at the moment, and equally, if you look behind me on the wall just up there, there is another clamp for a 4th camera, which looks down on this end of the studio and shows all of this equipment. It's kind of a geographic wide shot of this end of the live streaming studio. And I can use that shot to talk about the pieces of equipment here and how they work and what they do when I'm talking about live streaming and studio design. Now, as I say, there's only 2 cameras in the studio at the moment. The 2 cameras, the camera from the overhead shot and the big wide shot there, those cameras aren't here at the moment because those 2 cameras are in my other studio, the virtual studio. But before I take you there and show you around that, let's just talk about how we can cut between these different camera angles. Now, I use 2 computers at this station here. I've got one Mac Mini for live streaming, for doing the encoding, and one Mac Mini which provides my slides and plays in videos. And I can switch between the different cameras and the Mac Mini that provides the slides and my videos with this thing here. This is an 8M Blackmagic Mini Extreme. It's an 8-channel. And you can see I've got little bits of blue tack next to some of the 2 of the key buttons so that I can touch feel my way and vision mix as I'm presenting. So I have my cameras here, and then number 8 is my Mac Mini that provides the slides. So there's a lot going on when I'm in a live stream situation and I'm presenting and vision mixing. 8-channel vision mixer. I've actually got 6 sources, but that's still a lot to be going on with. So it's important that I know what I'm sending out and I can see all the relevant feeds, and that's why when you look here there seems to be a lot of monitors, but it's quite simple. The main encoding Mac that I'm sitting in front of on this wide shot, this is the machine that streams the whole production out, runs Zoom, runs Teams, whatever it is. That I can monitor that on this big screen here. So my eye line just has to move very slightly from the wide shot lens down to this big screen to see my guests. The output of my vision mixer, well, that turns up on this smaller screen just to the left, as I'm looking at you, just to the left of the wide angle shot, so I can keep an eye on what it is I'm streaming out and make sure I've got the right source going out. On this camera, the close-up camera, those 2 screens are duplicated. So that main screen that has the encoding Mac on it that's running Zoom, well, that's running on this screen here just to my right of the close-up camera. And the output of the vision mixer, which was on a screen to the side of the wide shot, is running on a small screen here just to my left of the close-up camera. And that screen is actually also a digital recorder, which is recording ProRes. It's actually an Atomos Ninja. Now, what I want to say is that this studio isn't that big. I mean, it's my edit suite. It's big enough to have an edit suite and an animation computer in here. But it's just big enough to be a small podcasting or training webinar studio. Any smaller and I'd start to struggle with the lighting. And to be honest, I'm struggling already. But then every filming situation is a compromise of some kind. You compromise the ideal background with the ideal sound with the ideal lighting. But what about with a virtual set? There is this notion that with a virtual set you don't need as big a room. You don't need as much space because you don't need that depth, that distance, that space in the actual set itself. Well, that is true to a degree. With a virtual set you can make a studio look much bigger than the physical space that you're actually in. But there's a few things that you need to think about if you're going to do that. So is this a virtual studio we're in now, or is it a real studio? Well, the honest truth is it's actually virtual. I'm sitting in front of a blue screen. There's no real set here. But what I've done is I've laid out the lighting and the camera positions in the studio to match that of the real studio. And then I've recorded the backgrounds to the real studio and I'm simply playing them in and keying them there on the blue background. Now, I'll show you quickly around here in a moment, but interestingly, initially I used a green screen background, but the green screen caused a bit of green fringing. And because the set, my original set, which is now the keyed in background for the virtual set, is predominantly blue, I decided to use a blue screen, and any blue fringing is then hidden in the blue of the backlights. Right, let's have a quick look around here and explain a few interesting logistical challenges that I had trying to replicate the real studio in this small space. So the challenge here is to make this virtual studio, which is in a very small flat where I can't attach anything to the walls, look almost indistinguishable from the real studio up in Norfolk. So let me show you around and show you what I've done. So first of all, of course, we've got this wrap around blue screen here, and I can pull this round and pull this back. So let me just show you what I mean. I can take this screen and I can just pull this back round like that and fold that whole screen away if I want. You can see that I've built a wooden frame here, and this wooden frame isn't bolted to the walls in any way. I've got my lighting, so I'm using two panel lights to light my blue screen, and I'm using one equivalent light, another dado tungsten light, to provide the backlight on my seated position in the studio. Backlight is even more important when you're doing a virtual key or a virtual studio. Now, if we look down here, you can see that I'm using exactly the same vision mixer as I'm using in the real studio, an 8-channel ATEM Mini. Now, what I'm doing this time is I'm using all the macros, and it's the macros that allow me to generate the virtual background. Now, the background, of course, is actually a recording from the real studio, and I'm playing it in as a moving background with these very simple media players. Now, the Blackmagic ATEM 8-channel mixer normally works in conjunction with a hyperdeck, but those are quite expensive, whereas these little media players, I got them off Amazon for about 20 or 30 quid. I'm using a main screen here, which my main computer, which is also my edit machine in this studio, is my encoding machine. And then if I come round here, you can see that this is just my laptop, which is also my source machine for all my slides and video play-ins. That is an input to this ATEM Mini Extreme and my 8-channel ATEM. And then what I'm doing is I'm actually controlling those macros because they're not easy to access. Once you've set them up and recorded them, that's great, but they're actually controllable with these tiny buttons here. So I've programmed and I'm controlling remotely the ATEM with this Stream Deck. So this becomes essentially my vision mixer, and each of these buttons programs or accesses the macro in the ATEM, which gives me my virtual background. So it looks like I'm cutting between a real set, but in actual fact I'm cutting between the two cameras with the moving background from each media player keyed in to the blue screen behind me. The other crucial thing is that both cameras are at the same height and the same position apart as the cameras in the studio. And that's how I make my virtual studio look as best I can look like the real studio. Does the virtual set take up less space than the real set? Well, actually it does. It takes up about half the space of the real set. But let's be clear, we still need physical space in order to make a virtual set work. I need the space for the backlight to shine down on me. You especially need backlight in a key situation because it creates a better key. And also, I need space between me and the chroma key background because the lights that are lighting me could cause shadows on the background if I'm sitting too close to the background being the chroma key, and that would destroy the key effect. So yes, I think I have managed to pretty much pull off an almost identical look in the virtual studio to the real studio, but there have been compromises and it does take up a bit less space. Which is better? Well, I have to say I still prefer a real set, but compromise is such that in this case I've had to create a fold-away virtual set with this pull round chroma key background, and actually it does work quite well. If you found that useful, don't forget you can find details of all my broadcast quality training courses. Just go to www.training.dinarnet.com, and if you want to watch the training courses online, you'll find those at www.videoschool.dinarnet.com.